let's go over everything that I know about how to win in 7 Wonders Duel. And why should you even listen to me on this topic? Well, I've played over 500 games of 7 Wonders Duel. I'm a total addict for it. I'm currently ranked 91st in the world on BoardGameArena.com for 7 Wonders Duel. Now, I know not everyone plays on Board Game Arena, but there has been over 12 million games played, so I think this puts me in the category of people that can maybe talk about some good strategies on how to win. So in this video, I'm going to be going over some easy mental tricks that you can remember or rules of thumb that you can go by to become one of the best 7 Wonders Duels players. Now, I'll say that I feel like there's a meta in this game, meaning that generally when someone is choosing between this card and this card, they almost always will choose this card, and everyone sort of plays that same way if you want to win. But a lot of times you'll see people that don't follow the rules of thumb that I'm going to go through in this video, and most of the time that's because they're a beginner player. So when I see them not following these rules, I think, oh, this is going to be an easy game for me to win. But sometimes they're not following the rules that you would expect someone to play by. They're doing abnormal things, and then eventually you're like, oh my gosh, I'm losing. And then at the end of the game, you realize, you go look the person up, they're one of the top 5 to 10 players in the whole world. And so I would say, if you follow what I'm saying in this video, you'll probably be a very good player, but you won't be one of the best. And that's where learning when to go against the common general rules of thumb will come into play, and that's the intuition you develop as you play the game more. So let's start off with talking about progress tokens. So when you first start a game of 7 Wonders Duel, the first thing you're going to see or do is set out 5 progress tokens. Now, most of them are not really going to change the way that you think about the values of the cards in the game, but there is one in particular that will change the way that you need to see the value of the cards in the game, and that one is law. So the first thing I always look for is law in our current game? And if it is, that's going to make science a viable path to win. So science would be a viable path, even in a game without law, but it is extremely difficult to win science without it, because you basically need to collect 6 science symbols. In the normal game, on the cards, there's only 6. So if the opponent can just stop you from getting one of the 6, then you can't win with science. But this law makes it the whole strategy opened up. So let's keep that in mind. This is the first thing you should look for. Now, the next most important progress token, in my opinion, is going to be this strategy token. So this one is whenever you get a military card, it gives you 1 extra shield. And so I would say without this token being available in the game, it is extremely difficult to win via military. And I would say military is the strategy that ends up in wins the lowest probability of the time. So usually I would say the game either makes it all the way to the end and you're counting victory points, or it ends in a science victory, especially when law is available. The probability of science victory is a lot higher, but this opens up military as a whole strategy and makes essentially all the red cards some of the most valuable cards in the entire game. So these are the 2 most important ones to really check for. Now, of the remaining 8, the other 8, they don't really affect my strategy all that much, but there's certain things you can do based on their availability. So I think the next most game-changing progress token, in my opinion, is economy. So whenever anyone needs to basically trade in money for resources, they have to give that money to you. And this can be so powerful and totally affect the game, especially if you pull off a strategy where you restrict the opponent's resources, which I'll go over later. The next one that has the most ability to change the game, in my opinion, is theology. So this one will give your wonders the ability to, when you play them, to do your turnover. And if you can get this and then use it on maybe at least 2 wonders that didn't have this symbol originally, that can be totally game-changing, the difference between win or losing. Then the next tier, I would say, are basically these 3. And so these are all around basically taking it to the end game and getting the most victory points. Now, it just depends on which one you prefer. It's going to depend on where you are in the game. Maybe if you already have 2 other progress tokens, you'll prefer this one the most, because then you would get 9, 3 for each one, including that one. If you need some cash at the time in the game, then maybe you prefer this one to get some money. Otherwise, this is just generally a good one to get points. And then I would put all these three in basically a tier of their own at the bottom, where these ones are basically going to be if the opponent has effectively done a good strategy where they deprive you of an important resource and have jacked up the price of that resource and taken it away from you, which we'll go over in this video, then you might need one of these two tokens essentially, because it's going to make your wonders 2 resources cheaper or the blue cards 2 resources cheaper. But actually, if you're at that point in the game where you need these, things probably aren't going very well anyways. And then this one is just going to give you 6 coins and then an additional 4 coins for every time you basically chain cards together. And I would, in my opinion, this is probably like the worst progress token in the game, or the one that I go for the least, and I would only grab it if I was really in desperate need for cash. Now, the next thing you're going to see after the 5 progress tokens are dealt out is you're going to see all your wonders. So let's go over how I would basically put these into different tier lists of how valuable the wonders are. So the base game of 7 Wonders Duels comes with 12 total wonders, and 5 of them have this symbol right here. Now, this is the singular most important symbol, in my opinion, on the wonders, because basically it allows you to redo your turn again. And so I would say a good rule of thumb is that any single wonder that has this symbol is going to be better than any wonder that does not have that symbol on it. So it's pretty easy to just grab these ones first. Now, if you're picking between, 2 of these as an option, how would you decide which one to get? Well, I've put them in my general order of my preference towards them. So I would say the one that I prefer the most is on top, and the one that I prefer the least is on the bottom. Now, this one on the top, I really like it because it's going to allow you to get the glass or the paper. And so if the other opponent does a strategy where they take, let's say, this wonder right here, the one that destroys a glass or paper card with this symbol, you can totally counteract that wonder with this one. I would say that if it's a game where the law token is available, this wonder is also very powerful because a lot of the science cards require the glass or the paper. And so you can actually just flip right into buying a science to pair with your law strategy. Now, I would say this one is pretty almost about equally as good as this one. And I'm kind of, undecided of which one I would rather have in a lot of cases, because this one just straight up gives you 12 coins, which can be so powerful at the beginning of the game because you only start with 7. And so it can be a good way to get a card you really want and have a ton of cash early on. Now, these ones are pretty similar, and I would actually say, let me reorder this. I would rather have this one with the 6 coins than the one that gives you 3 and takes 3 away from your opponent, because it's more useful in most situations, in my opinion, because pretty much at any time in the game, I can use 6 cash. Now, this one, sometimes I really want to flip and get that card and get the 3 cash, but my opponent might not actually have 3 cash, so I feel like I've partially wasted this ability, so that's why I tend to prefer this one. And now finally, the least useful of the best wonders, I think, is this one, which becomes better at the end of the game if it's going to be a game that goes into no one's winning by science or military, but has this symbol and a lot of victory points, so still pretty good. Now, I would say these 4 are basically in the next tier of wonders for me, with this one being my strongest preference because it's really nice. It can give you any of the 3 brown cards, which is super useful. And it also can stop your opponent's strategy if they picked this one, which is really powerful because it takes away a brown card from you. But if they've taken this and you get this, it basically makes this one so much less powerful. And I do think that this is actually one of the most powerful wonders in the game and one of my favorite strategies, because I like to basically get a lot of a single brown card and then take away any that the opponent has. And basically, at that point, if you can make the price of 1 brown card extremely high, you can take them out of the game. Now, this one's pretty good too, because you can jack up the price of a paper or a glass, one of the gray cards, but I think it's not quite as good as the brown one because there's more ways to counter this. So if we go into the age 2 cards, then you'll see that there's only one that's really good for countering this one. because basically if you take this to take away your opponent's brown cards and then they get this, it's the same effect as this essentially, and it can override whatever you were trying to do. Whereas there's these two age 2 cards, which effectively can't be destroyed by this and give the opponent the paper or the glass. And so the opponent just has basically more ways that they can counter this effect than they can with this. So I prefer this one. And then finally, this one's pretty good, but it's such a grab bag. You never know if one of the 3 that you're going to grab is going to be useful. So I tend to not like to pick it that much. Also, I would never rely on this for a science strategy because basically you're going to be grabbing 3 from the box randomly and then choosing one of them to keep. But there's going to be 5 in the box, so if the law wasn't in the original 5, there's only a 60% chance that it'll be there. And so I don't think you want to basically try your luck with a 40% chance that it's not there. For me, these 3 wonders are all my least favorite at the bottom tier. Now, the order in which I would prefer them just depends on which progress tokens are available for the game. So this one can be pretty good if the opponent has been trying to do like a resource starving strategy against you where they're grabbing like these 2 symbols, because then maybe if they're trying to destroy your cards, you can go back and get one that you really need. It can also be pretty good if you're going for a science-based strategy. So if law is available, you can sell a science card early, or maybe your opponent would, and go back and grab it to get the 6th one that you need to pair with the law token. So I'd say if law is available, I think this is sort of the most valuable of all 3 of these. However, if law is not available, and let's say strategy is available, then military is a viable strategy, and then I would probably value this one over the other 2. Now let's go through some of the age 1 cards and generally how I would value them. So what you'll see here is the ones that I think of as probably the most valuable. I have a bunch more right here that I'll go through in a second that I think are probably less valuable than the ones that you're seeing right now. I would say that generally yellows are the most valuable to get early on. In particular, these 3 that allow you to buy the wood, clay, or stone for 1 each. And these will become even more valuable if your opponent grabbed this wonder earlier in the game where they're trying to cut off your resources with this icon. So these are incredibly valuable because they will allow you to fight that sort of resource starvation strategy. Also remember, whenever you sell a card in the game, so you chuck it into the discard, you get 2 coins plus each yellow. So getting these yellows early on is so valuable because you're going to be selling so many cards throughout the game. Now, this card that just gives you 4 is also a really nice card and helps for selling too. So generally, these sit in the top tier, and these should be your absolute top priority with a preference for these 3 cards. Now, all these other cards are really nice too, and you might prefer them over yellows in certain situations. But generally, these brown cards that are free are really nice. So there's 1 for each type of resource in the first age. I mean, there's also these other ones in age 1, but these cost 1, so I prefer the free ones over these ones that have the cost. Now, getting these gray cards can be very valuable as well, but if your opponent has taken this wonder that can strip one of those from your city, then they become less valuable to me because you know your opponent's just going to go with this, destroy whatever one you took. And then finally, so the sciences are down here, and I have them generally in 2 tiers. So the first one is these 2 on the top. And why are these 2 better? Well, because they come with these icons that you can pair with their matching symbols in age 2. So these ones can be really strong. Because if you can buy them in age 1, then you can come around and get these ones in age 2 and get their exact matching icons and get a progress token. Now, getting these sciences is nice as well, but it's not as good because they don't come with the icon. And then if you want to match them with their age 2 versions, which are these, they're really expensive to get and they cost a ton of resources, and in particular the gray resources that can be hard to come by. So this is generally how I would rate all these cards in how the order that I want to get them in a game that has no law token as one of the 5 available progress tokens. But if the law token is one of the 5 available progress tokens, then I might shift my rating of all these cards to basically put maybe these 2 above the grays, and maybe I would even prefer these 2 on par with or more than these free browns. Now, these are the remaining cards of age 1. These are pretty decent. You got to pay one for them, but they give you that brown resource. I would say if I can afford these, generally I'm gonna try to buy these. Like they're still pretty good, even though they're worse than, for the most part, the other cards that I showed on the other screen. Now these blues, it depends on whether I'll take them or not. So I would probably never pay money for them if I needed to pay money for this one. These two are just gonna be free. Um, I might take them if I don't really need the cash and I don't have any yellows. So if I don't have any yellows and I sell, I only get 2 money. So if I don't really need the cash and I'm selling, I'm only going to get 2. I'll probably just buy them, and that's about that. I'm not that thrilled about having them. And then finally, these 4 reds are the absolute worst in round 1. They might as well just say the word sell on them for the most part, because 99% of the time, I and any other good player I've ever seen is just selling them. And the reason that you're selling them is because of the way that the game works when you go from the end of one age to the next. Basically, the way that you determine who's going to go first in the next round, which is super powerful. You want to go first in the next round, but it's going to be determined on whoever has the strongest military, or I should say, whoever has the weakest military. So if you've taken one of these and your opponent has it, they have a weaker military than you and they get to go first. So you really don't want to take these because whatever shield you're getting from them is not valuable enough to make up for the fact that your opponent's going to get to go first. Now I'm going to go over the age 2 and the age 3 cards a little bit quicker because there's not as much of like a tier list that you can form, because so much of it depends on what's happened till this point in the game and which wonders each person has and which cards they got in the first round. So the choices, I think, become a lot more interesting and less obvious in age 2 and age 3. But let's go over some things to keep in mind in age 2 and just talk about the cards within their own categories, how valuable they can be. So, as usual, in round 1, these yellow cards in age 2 can be extremely valuable, and especially for countering the opponent's strategy if they've tried to deprive you of resources. So, like I said before, if the opponent has gone for this card, then or this wonder, then you really want to try to target one of these two. If you can get at least one of these two, you should be all right. Now, if the opponent has grabbed this card here that can take away a brown card from your city, like I said earlier, you really want to get this card. So these can be, I would say, 3 of the biggest like sort of game changers that will determine whether you can win in age 2. Then there's always this card, which is quite nice in the yellow category, just getting 6 coins and then more money when you sell in the future. Now, these cards can be extremely powerful as well, where they give you 2 of the resource. And the reason that these can be so strong, so what I really like to do is if I've gotten this symbol right here, is I try to get at least one of these and say that I bought this. And in the first round, I also got this card. And then say my opponent had this one in their city. So right now they do have access to the brown resources. Then I will try to play this one, destroy that, and now for the rest of the game, if they don't have the wonder that gives them any of the brown resources, and they haven't gotten this card, so I'll try really hard to use my redo turns to make sure that they don't get this card. Now, for the rest of the entire game, woods cost them 5, and there's basically a very small chance that they could even possibly win if I've set this strategy up correctly. Now, sciences are always going to be an interesting thing to keep your eye on, especially if the law of progress token was in the game, and especially if you got one of the 2 sciences earlier. Remember, you compare these and then get one of the progress tokens. These can be extremely powerful in the second round. Now, rounding out the rest of the age 2 cards, you still have some access to get these gray cards if you haven't got them in any other way. So those can be decent grabs as well. I would nearly, most of the time, take those and not sell them. Now, the military, these ones can be strong, especially if you have gotten the strategy token. I would definitely want to buy any of these 5 if I've gotten this token. If not, or even if my opponent has got it, I still am like really trying to get these to fight their strategy. Let's say this token's not in the game, then these 3 are going to be pretty powerful still, especially these 2, because they can allow you to chain onto militaries in the 3rd age, so you don't have to pay for them. Now, these 2, honestly, if this token isn't in the game, these things I'm selling I'm selling this like 99% of the time, right? And I'm probably selling this like 80% of the time too, even if I have the resources, just because they're just not that strong for an H2 card. And then finally, in H2, it can be pretty good to start going for some blue cards, just because you know at this point probably if the game will or won't make it to the end game based on whether or not someone's got one of these two tokens, or if it's looking like they're going to be able to pull off a science victory without the law token. And if not, you want to start scoring some points. And so 2 of them are worth 5, pretty good. 3 of them are worth 4, but the ones that are worth 4 also give you these icons that can chain to blue cards in H3, so they're all pretty equally valuable. Now in H3, there's a new type of card, which is these purple cards, which are going to impact the game a lot if it ends up going to the end of the game. And the way these work is basically all of them get shuffled up, and randomly 3 end up in the structure. Now let's talk about these and their impact on the game. So this one right here is probably the best and most important one, and honestly, this should just say 8, really, because basically it's at the end of the game, you get 2 victory points for the opponent in the city that's built the most wonders. I don't know that I've ever seen a game where there wasn't at least one person with 4 wonders built. So this should literally probably just say 8, which is a ton of points for one card to score you. So it's probably the best one. Now this one can be a massive like game-changing card, because if someone's been going for some strategy where they end up getting a lot of money from a lot of yellow cards, then you can either keep up with them by buying this card, or if it's the person that is getting all the money that buys this card, there's almost going to be no way to beat them if it makes it to the end game, because basically you get 1 victory point for each 3 coins. I've seen it where there's been a game where I just got a ton of yellow cards and I got this card, and then I just every time instead of buying a card I just sold it. I end up with like 22 points from this card alone. There's no way the other person could beat me at that point. Then these 5 are all just cards that for each card of this type or these 2 types in whichever city has the most of them, you get 1 coin and 1 victory point. Now these can be really strong cards if one person has really been loading up on a particular strategy. And in particular, these 3 I've seen get some huge payout sometimes if the person has like 7 yellows, or 7 of these combined, or like 6 or 7 blue cards. Now these ones seem to get less value typically, and I would say even the green one probably is usually a little stronger than the red, because usually when the red one gets grabbed, people just don't have that many red cards in their city. So it's probably the worst of all of these. So rounding out the rest of H3, we are going to see there's 5 yellow cards that are going to give you money in different situations based on just how many of a particular thing have happened in your city. These will be useful as you're going to be needing cash throughout H3, because a lot of these cards in H3 just take a lot of resources, and if you haven't done a great job of building up all the resources, then you'll probably need the cash. But a lot of times you might have only built like 1 red card in your city the whole time. At that point, you could still get the 3 victory points, but sometimes it becomes more valuable to just sell these. Now, usually at a certain point in H3, you can tell if someone is going to win via military or science. So, right, if the law is in the game, then these become obviously much more valuable cards. There's 2 types of new sciences introduced that weren't in the first 2 ages, which is this one and this one. And then a lot of times, if law is in the game, it all becomes about just using wonders that have these like redo effects to try to make sure that you're not giving your opponent these symbols, or if you're the one that was going for this strategy, that you're using your redo effects to get these symbols. And a lot of times when law is in the game, these symbols can be really powerful because someone's going to use them to flip into basically the game-winning science. Now, if strategy's in the game, these become extremely valuable because military is now a very viable strategy for someone, and they're generally all going to be appealing. They're pretty hard to get because they have like a lot of resources typically, and then there's 2 that have 3, and if you pair it with this, they have 4, which is super valuable. Now, generally for a lot of times, this card will be cheaper because you're just getting these resources throughout the game. This one always costs 8. And if strategy is not in the game, a lot of times, if you end up where this is the only card that you can interact with, you might do the math towards the end and just determine that it's not worth the 8 money to even buy this because it's not moving the needle on anything. No one's winning from military, and you're not getting many points from it, so you just chuck this one a lot of the time. And then finally, if nobody is going to be winning from military, nobody's going to be winning from science, it just becomes about getting these blue cards for all these victory points, especially these ones that are worth 7 or 6, become extremely valuable, and pairing them with some of these purple cards that can really rack it up. And that's going to be a lot of times determine who wins, is just how these super high point cards fall at the very end. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please subscribe for more just like it.